Hi folks, CodeTutor here and my name is Anil Deshpande. I think we are not yet done with the repository. We forgot something very important. So let me go to the country repository, not the interface, the implementation, which implements the country repository. And if you come down here, that is line number 26, this part of the code, that is get country list. This is basically getting the country list from a utility function. And where is it getting from? It is getting it from a JSON file. We are making it mimic API by introducing delay here. There is a problem with this particular mechanism. First of all, we are stuck with this particular mechanism where we are fetching the countries from a local JSON file. What is that JSON file? In the resource.raw folder, and we are fetching it from here. So right now it might be coming from a JSON file, but later point in time we might say that this needs to come from API. That we can't do it right now because we are left with using this particular utility function that we had implemented a long time back when we had started this particular code. So if you think about it, there are multiple violations here. The repository is trying to do more than one thing. That is a SRP, and then it is a OCP violation as well. That is a open and close principle violation, because this doesn't give me a flexibility to change the code later point in time. I am stuck with this particular thing, and if I want to modify this thing, then I have to keep coming here and make changes here. That is a OCP violation. And then there is no abstraction here. Everything is being managed through some kind of a concrete implementation. That is a problem. So how do we fix this particular issue? So instead of directly using this get country list, what we will do is we will create a interface called as CountryListServiceProvider. It will have function get country list. The advantage of this particular country list service provider is we can have various implementations of this particular country list provider. One implementation might try to get it from, say, network. Another implementation might try to get it from a local JSON. And one implementation might actually try to get it from the DB. And if we pass this to repository doesn't care how it is getting it from, as long as it is going to adhere to this particular interface contract. So it makes our code Dependency Inversion Principle, OCP, and even SRP compliant. So we will take this approach to implement this particular feature. Let me create an interface called as CountryListServiceProvider. Let me create a separate package called as service, and under this particular service, let me create an interface CountryListServiceProvider, and this will have a function get country list. And then what I can do is I can create another class CountryListServiceProvider implementer. This implements CountryListServiceProvider, and then it has to implement the members. And now what I will do is I will move the code from the utility functions into this. I will pass the context. So let me hold this particular context in a local variable. Then let me have a private function which tries to fetch values from the country's JSON file. And then let me go to the helper.kt and copy this code here, the private get JSON here. And now I basically don't need this. I can use this itself in my code. So let me go back to the country repository. You can see that I am already getting the compilation error. That's not a problem. We will fix it. Let me go to the top. Instead of passing the context, what I will do is I will pass the service provider, and then I will use the country list service provider dot get country list, and this is not needed anymore. But once again, I will have to change where repository is getting instantiated. So let me go here, show usages, new instance creation. It is getting created in the scaffold. So let me go here, and as you can see here, I am already getting a compilation error. So what I can do is val country list provider, which is a kind of a service provider. So I can write service provider, which is of type country list service provider, is equal to country list service provider implementer and pass the context, and then pass this service provider. Then the repository will not even come to know what it has received here, as long as it has the service provider. And that is the advantage of this mechanism. Right now, the implementation of the service provider is implementing the same mechanism of fetching it from a local JSON file. Later point in time, I can simply replace it with something else, and the repository will not even come to know that the service provider that it is using is bringing those values from different place, as long as it is getting it. For example, let me show you an implementation where I am using Retrofit to fetch the data from an API. So let me go back here and create another package here called as network, and under this network, let me create object, call it as Retrofit instance. This will have the Retrofit instantiation code, and then I will create a API interface. This is all standard Retrofit implementation, nothing complicated. If you are new to this, then probably you may have to learn how the Retrofit framework integration is done. But what I am basically doing here is creating an instance of Retrofit to manage API call that I will be making. And then what I will do is I will now create another instance of CountryListServiceProvider, but this time it will be fetching it from the network, that is API call. So let me create another new service, call it as CountryListProvider via network, and this implements CountryListServiceProvider, and I will have to implement the members. First thing I need is reference to the API service, and then the internal implementation is to make the API call. And that's it. And now let's assume that later point in time your lead or a PM comes and says that please change the code wherein the list needs to come from a API. All that you will have to do is go back to the instantiation, where instead of CountryListServiceProvider implementer, you just replace it with CountryListProvider via network. That's it. Nothing changes. You don't have to even come and change the code here in the country repository. And that is the biggest advantage of using this mechanism to write the code. Now our code is OCP, SRP and DIP compliant. So it's good that we have refactored our code here. Now let's move back to the view model, that is country view model, which is already refactored to some extent. It uses the abstracted iCountry repository. It also uses iCountry view model. But if you start looking at this particular code, there are violations of single responsibility principle that we might be seeing here. How is that possible? Well, the iCountry view model implementation talks about the implementation of all these four functionalities, that is get all countries, delete country, update country and filter countries. That it is doing perfectly fine. That is not the problem. The problem is this, that is show delete alert dialog box and show update dialog box, which is kind of state that we are maintaining in this view model to manage whether to show a particular dialog box or not, which is a UI logic. You are maintaining these states which will be used for deletion purpose and updation purpose. They are not directly doing the deletion and updation, but you need them. From the purpose of understanding what's happening on the UI during the user interaction. Only for that purpose you are maintaining that particular state, not actually doing the deletion and updation. Same is the case with filter. So this country view model is actually doing more than one thing. One, it is of course doing the deletions, updations through the implementation of iCountry view model, but it is also doing all of this UI management in the same place. So somebody might say that this is a violation of SRP, that is single responsibility principle. So the solution is to separate out this particular model in such a way that one view model is all about just UI state management and another model is about actual business logic, which is deletions, updations and filtering and fetching the countries. We shall see how to do that in the next video. So stay tuned. That brings us to the end of this particular video. Don't forget to like, comment, share the video and subscribe to the channel. Take care. Bye.